30 questions, multiple choice.
Sorry.
The reservoir for Texas.
Kitty and Bird. So there's about 30 multiple choice questions, and then I have several different matching sections. I have a matching section on characteristics of organisms. So for instance, if I said, has an envelope, which group have an envelope? Viruses. If I say something like, has a cyst, which group has a cyst? Protozoa. If I say something like, has an endospore, which organism has an endospore?
Bacteria.
Bacteria. Right. So it's going to be matching like that. There's also a matching. The morning class has kind of negotiated, and I thought when they negotiated for you all also, because this is a good thing, I think. So what they've negotiated is that I wouldn't ask specific genus or species for almost all the protozoans and metazoans. So what I've done is I've adhered to that. So you'll need to know in general what the protozoan, metazoans, and exoparasites are, but I didn't get into a lot of the detail for the genus and species of those organisms because there was too many. But for the pathogenic fungi, which were only 4 of them, and really tinea, right? That's opportunistic. And then for the viruses, there was only a few of them, right, that we talked about specifically, right? Influenza, coronavirus, the arboviruses, herpes, right, and HIV/AIDS.
Yeah.
So if you talk those 5, I've incorporated them into the matching sections. But other than that, I stayed away from genus and species of the protozoan, metazoan, exoparasites, because it's just a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? Yes.
So when you were to ask a question, would be like the tick, for example, or you would say
Yes, it's gonna be more
ringworm.
general.
Okay.
Well, no, but tinea is an important pathogen, right? So when I said there are 4 major pathogens for fungi, right? Blastomyces, coccidioides, histoplasma, and sporothrax. But then I said tinea because it's important that you guys know that. I stayed away from Stachybotrys and Cladosporium. I stayed away from that. But I did talk about ringworm because it's really it's an important pathogen, more nuisance than anything, but important because you'll see a lot of it.
But we would be expecting the big words that we come
You should expect some big words, yes.
Okay.
Yes, okay, good. So I'm gonna look at it one more time before I go to publish this afternoon, but I think I'm gonna adhere to that. And when I finally come up with something that I feel comfortable with and feel it's safe and fair, I will publish that. I will send you a note saying the exam is composed of this many questions. There will be at least 6 short answer questions. You know what one of them is. One of them is the malarial life cycle. You're gonna have to be able to draw that and explain it. I do not want a dissertation. I don't want to have to read 8 paragraphs. I just simply want to look at it to make sure you understand how it works. And then I will ask questions about the malarial life cycle like we discussed in class. Yes,
Okay, there's two diagrams.
the one that I have that I made is the
Okay,
one that I
the
would
red
expect.
one.
Okay? Good? Anybody else? Anybody else?
I have something to share that's cool.
Okay, wait.
So my little boy about 6 months ago went to Half Price Books with me and wanted to pick out some National Geographics, like old ones. So last night we were reading a story in a National Geographic falls off the bookshelf and opens to malaria. And it's all, that's like 2007 edition.
It's one of my favorite issues.
And it was like, I was reading it last night, my boyfriend wouldn't shut up, he was just wanting to talk, so I closed it and read it today. But I did flip to a page and it had the life cycle.
And how much you understood, right?
It was really cool, but it was also like kind of very devastating, like super sad.
It is
Every
one of the
30
big,
seconds.
it is one of the big killers of the world, right?
Yeah.
So the other big killer that nobody talks about is tuberculosis. Tuberculosis takes about 4,000 deaths every day. 4,000 deaths every day. That's a lot.
It says someone dies in Africa from malaria every 30 seconds, and most of them are under age 5. I don't
Because
know
no
if that's
immune system.
Yeah, I don't know if that's changed since 2007, but.
Well, I mean, if anything, it's gotten worse. And COVID, during the times of COVID, we had less malaria because people were not going out and about, right? But unfortunately, as we're gonna talk about today, especially we're gonna make reference to what's going on in the United States, is the individuals who need most help can't afford it. And so that really drives the divide between those that have the United States and those that don't have a lot of other countries.
What does your shirt say today?
My shirt says today, "Do not worry, I'll be okay. My grandmother rubbed an egg over my body." Right? Do y'all know what that means?
No.
The oval.
This is the treatment, the cure for mal ojo. Mal ojo is evil eye. And so in the Hispanic Latino culture, yes, it's
Don't
all,
have an eye on yours?
you know, I share my culture with you all the time, right? But, part of our culture, and I don't really believe in this, but a lot of my family members do. And so what'll happen if they see a little baby, they'll go and say, "Ay, tan chulito," you know, whatever, that's it. But then the older Hispanic individuals will come over, I'm gonna touch you. Older Hispanic individuals will come over and will touch the baby, especially on the head. And what that means is, and I don't want any ill will to come of you, because the Latino culture believes that if you basically pay a lot of attention to somebody, that the bad juju will go to them and make them sick. And so in order to get rid of that, we call ojo, it's not really ojo, but that's what we call it, is a curandero, a person who's trained in it, can take a raw egg and will do the sign of the cross all over the entire body and say the rosary while they're doing that. And then afterwards, they'll turn them over and do the same thing, and then they'll crack the egg. It'll be cooked because of the heat, the fever, and then you put it underneath the bed to make sure that the spirits know that you have the baby's back and you're taking care of the baby.
That's deep. I did it when my daughter was a newborn. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm crazy, but I got somebody, I have a friend whose aunt, she's from Mexico, but she comes quite often to Luling, and I thought I could do stuff to my daughter like that.
So a lot of times when we're playing with people,
And she, I will say, she's never been sick.
when we're playing with people and we want them to feel like we're taking care of them, although we're just having fun with them, we will say, "What does this mean, Michelle?"
Oh, my husband tells that to my son all the time.
What does it mean?
Um,
Sana sana kulita la lana. What does it mean?
Like that it's gonna get better, like if he's hurt
I can hear you
himself.
saying something, right? I wish, the little tail of a frog.
Mhm.
That's it. It doesn't really make any sense, but it's what we say, and
And the
it's
kids
supposed to
think
make.
it works.
You learn something new every day.
I believe in all of it, because how do you know something's not true?
I think I'm more confused when we started.
I don't believe in that. Well, my family's from
A lot,
Oh,
again,
okay.
if people don't understand what's causing them to be sick, they make up stuff to make them feel better, right? Good?
I wrote a paper on something like this.
I want the paper, give it to me.
I don't know if I still have it, it was 5 years ago, but it was about how spirituality should be incorporated into the healthcare.
Well, again, I tell you that to me, the best medicine is a combination of East and
Yeah,
West.
I mean, there's so many studies done on placebo effect.
So I have a lot of training in medicine. But when I go home and somebody's talking about some infection they have, they all, after they finish telling their story, they all look at my aunt, who's a curandera, because they're waiting for her to say, oh, just
Always the aunt.
come on over here, I'll get you a little rub, we'll put it on your chest, you'll be fine. I'm like, what about me? I know a lot of this stuff. And they're like, you're not a curandera. Because the Hispanic world, the Latinos do not trust the medical institution. They trust what they know. That's the problem I have. So my research ideas, right? How am I gonna get the Latinos to understand that medicine's good?
They probably love you anyways, despite your faults, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it's not a bad thing to like it and hate it at the same time. Like when I'm sick, I don't take, that's what we were just talking about a minute ago, I don't take any allergy medicines anymore, because when I would forget about it, my allergies would be tenfold, like, worse than they've ever been before. And like my daughter, I do not give her any medication unless she has like a fever over like 104, which happened once in her life and it was from teething. But
When we talk about immunology, I'll tell you the story of my vaccines that I did at the house for my allergies. I'll tell you that story, but not today.
take a right now.
No.
I'm gonna bring my dog to you if anything ever happens. I'm just gonna call you and be like.
So here's the deal, Elle, I can never win with those things. Because if I do and it helps, you're happy. But if I do and your dog doesn't get any better or it gets worse,
Yeah.
so I try not to get
I
involved.
found a worm attached to my dog's paw yesterday.
Attached to his what?
To his paw yesterday.
His paw.
Yes.
His paw, okay.
I have
I
a
heard
video
pie,
of it.
I'm like,
I have a video of it.
oh yeah, you gotta show it to me. Not right
Okay,
now, but later.
okay.
Anybody else have questions about the exam poop?
And the review is gonna be at 1:30.
1:30.
Okay.
Right, 1:30. It was late at night, I had just finished grading a whole bunch of practicals for my 3 o'clock class. And so I was thinking about them, and when I wrote 3 o'clock, then a couple of students said, is it 3 o'clock? I'm like, oh, shoot. So I had to send it out again.
That
So
actually
1:30.
works better for me.
Well, it doesn't work good for me, because I have to be someplace else at 3:30, but, anybody else have questions about the exam?
Do it in lecture, I guess 10:30 then on Tuesday, the exam.
10:30.
How exactly is that gonna work? Like, are we
You-
gonna sit in
you-
our groups?
You're gonna stay in your group.
Okay.
I can't put you in the lab because Dr. John's in there, so it's
Yeah,
just gonna have to be in
understand.
here. So like, one group can be here, one group can be here, one group can be back there, one group can be, I don't know, we'll figure it out, okay? So,
Have you done that before?
a lot.
And that seems to be working great. Like, I'm not like.
Like, what do you mean it
saying,
seems to be working
No, like,
great?
you know, like, I'm a little like, I
Nervous
guess,
of it.
nervous about it, and I don't know how it's gonna be, everyone talk about the same thing, am I gonna be like?
I'm sure nobody's gonna talk about the same thing. I'm sure everybody's gonna be talking about something different.
Okay.
Nobody, you're not gonna be sitting there and Jen say all of a sudden, okay, everybody, go to number 3 now. So,
No.
everybody will be doing something
Do
different.
we get our own tests?
Yes,
Oh.
but you're gonna submit everything, but you will come up to me and I'll basically say the captains are, and the captain will come up and present their answer sheet plus all. I will account for all tests because unfortunately, a lot of my stuff ends up on the cheater sites, and I don't want my exams to end up on the cheater sites because then I can't use them ever again. So the cheater sites proctor you, or tutor whatever, check, those are all the cheater sites.
The ones we don't use?
Yeah, a lot of my stuff is on there, and if I can sue those people, I will, because, but really, I should be suing the student for putting nobody has any right to use my intellectual property as a way to get onto a cheater site. And if you're doing that, if you are stealing somebody's intellectual and pass it on as yourself, you are breaking copyright laws. Everything that I create is mine, it belongs to me. You can use it, but you cannot use it on a cheater site.
ACC should have something where they like scan your tests and then they can like scan the internet and see if it was going on and like.
That's why I don't give my test out.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you use a cheater site, you're just cheating yourself. Plus you're using my stuff and you don't have my permission to do it that way. Yep.
So each group is gonna have a different version of a test? Or is it just gonna be the
Same
same
version.
version? And so all the people there are gonna have the same version, and so we're just each gonna fill it out? And then, or is it just gonna be like as a group?
You're working collaboratively to fill out one answer sheet.
Okay.
That is one Scantron and one short answer. Those are the only ones I'm gonna, everything else I'm gonna shred immediately after the exam. Okay?
And you said the 5th one is gonna be on the computer.
It can be, I haven't decided quite yet.
Can we not?
Why are you like worried about the 5th exam already? Tram's like, I've had enough of this guy, I want
Is
out.
it possible to just do it in person?
What?
Like instead of online?
I have multiple versions of every exam. We
Because
will
if
vote.
you-
The reason I wanna do it online,
Uh-huh.
is I don't have to grade anything. The
That's
system
true.
will grade it for me.
Would we do it in class?
Yeah.
Okay, then that doesn't.
So that means there won't be any multiple choice, short answer?
You can still.
The
do
short answer, so the short answer will
Oh,
be
you
done
still?
in class,
Okay.
but you'll bring your computer in or you'll use the computers here to engage Blackboard.
That's not bad though. I thought it was gonna be like an at home and I was like,
If I do it online, I can be much more creative
yeah.
than if I do it.
Oh,
You mean harder?
Like much more creative.
Isabella, I can put a test together, girl, let me tell you.
Oh, I know.
You think we don't know this?
Why are you
Because I was like, we're going over the test and I don't wanna miss
Okay.
anything.
Well, I'm glad you're here because we're starting on unknowns today and I want you to start on
Yeah,
unknowns.
that's why.
Your allergies too.
Anybody else have questions about the exam?
It's not.
Again, at 1:30.
No, no, you're good.
you can come in. At 1:30.
No, just anybody, I would be like, oh my
Okay,
God.
remember, I will stay there until people don't have any more questions. I will answer whatever question you have. Okay, it is not mandatory, you do not have to come. Anybody else, questions before we start? Okay, we start Unit 4 today.
Crazy. This is
I know.
human.
Yeah, this is now, we're transitioning from everything that was foundational and everything that was about the organisms to now talking about how the organisms interact in us so that eventually we can talk about the infectious process. Okay? So now it's gonna get really good. And so we start with, what are you laughing at? We start with thinking about health. So what determines good health really is really broken up into 3 categories. There's good physical health, which the easiest way to look at that, Senior Eric, is to take some blood from an individual and look at the chem profiles. Whatever you might be looking at, right? Whether it be hepatic system, renal system, whatever. You can look at those systems, you can see if those values that we're looking for, bilirubin, urobilinogen, whatever, fall within the realm of what we consider to be normalized. And those particular values change ever so often because as the population gets bigger and we get more data, we can really tell what really is normal in the population. While it is a little bit different with ethnicity, right, we can still hold that value to that, right? Likewise, if you've noticed that the glucose levels that you're considered pre-diabetic have gotten a lot tighter, right? It used to be 120, now it's down to, I don't know, 109 or something crazy like that, right? But if you fall within that range, you're good, but if you fall a little bit out of that range, they're considered you pre-diabetic, right? And that's mostly due to the fact that we now have an ability to intervene and help individuals as they're becoming pre-diabetic, to help coach them to get them to a point where they're not gonna become diabetic, right? What we need to really do is go further than that. It's just basically say that obesity is a disease. And if we say that obesity is a disease, then we can put a lot more resources into it. Because 40% of the population of the United States of America is obese. Right? And that's not good. So we have a lot of parameters for physical health, right? Yes, ma'am.
Is a parameter of a disease, like, because obesity is self-inflicted in a sense.
But you can tell if somebody's obese because of their cholesterol levels, because of their triglyceride levels, because of other things that might be affected, like their liver enzymes.
So it's not just based on the weight, it's also based on the test and how they run it.
To me, the blood tests are a bigger indicator of what's going on. Because you can have a fairly large person, but they can be very healthy, right? Especially if they're young. But the older they get, the more stress that puts on the body, and the more likelihood some of their organs will become dysfunctional. Yes, ma'am.
I was like also thinking like thyroid issues or like medication.
There's a lot of thyroid problems, right? And so most people have hypothyroidism. And when they have hypothyroidism, then they gain a little weight, right?
Would that be Hashimoto's?
It can be, but not necessarily, right? And then some people have hyperthyroidism where no matter what they do, they never gain weight. And it's pretty interesting to think about how that's all related to.
Yeah, because I can't really be controlled to a certain extent.
It can be controlled with certain meds, Synthroid, things like that. We can control some of that.
Aren't
But
those,
you're
like,
right.
the plastics though that you're talking about, like those are hormonal influencers hazardous.
It can be, for sure.
Micro-
But
chemical-
a lot of those ideas are my ideas. I mean, some people have said them before, but there's no real research that says this is what it is. Most of it is anecdotal. And nobody's gonna jump on the bandwagon until we have scientific data that says that.
And nobody really cares that much right now, 'cause it's kind of the same thing with like the, H1N1, like people just aren't looking there, not
H5N1,
seeing them.
you're right. So we have other problems in the world that are more urgent, and that's what we're dealing with right now. So think about the biggest problems in the United States right now that nobody's thinking about: obesity, fentanyl, right? And people don't know this, but there's problems with neurotube defects in the valley. Nobody's talking about it.
Why?
What defects?
What do you think it
Neurotube
is?
defects.
Oh.
Spinal bifida,
Yeah.
anencephaly, menincephaly, and so that's all part of the generation of the spinal cord and the brain.
Or like folate deficiency?
That's a folate deficiency. And what we found out is that the folks down there aren't getting folate because we put vitamin D in bread, right? They get it if you eat bread, but if you only consume artisan bread, you're not gonna get it. And if you only consume tortillas, which is the big staple down in South Texas, you're not gonna get folate. So what we've done now is we've added folate to the masa of the tortilla, and now hopefully we'll do away with that spinal bifida problem. Because it's a big
So
problem. It's a big problem. Nobody's talking about it. But I read way too
But we
much.
need taxpayers, we need these people to live, you know, and that's a big thing that people are talking about, so keep the babies alive so they grow up and pay taxes. Everybody's so worried about.
And
you know,
we
it makes no
in
sense.
the United States of America have one of the lowest birth rates. We are a maturing society, right? That means a lot to a lot of people, right? Maturing society means we're getting older, but when I say maturing society, is many of us are deciding not to have children.
Or like one where we used to have like 8.
I don't know about 8, but yeah, I could.
Well, also-
We used to have 3.2, right now we have 1.1 or something like that. yeah.
Fertility is a big thing right now, nobody talks about that.
That's true too, but specifically for my age group, my sister's age group, your age group, she can have a baby just thinking about it, right? So.
I know, I have a lot of friends, myself included, that cannot have a baby.
And
Whether
you're
they've had
gonna
another
find
one
some
or
correlation
multiple.
to some of the topics we're gonna talk about in Unit 5 and infertility.
Like thyroid.
And I'm talking infectious stuff, right? Mostly infectious stuff, right? So chlamydia, those kinds of things that can lead to infertility. Those are the ones I'll talk about. Well, that's good. But it is really prevalent. It is really prevalent.
I know
A lot
it
of
was
people
a
don't
couple
know they
years
have
ago.
chlamydia.
That is true also.
Especially
It's-
men.
and especially those vermin.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then they charm you, Eric. Ay, mi cielo, yo te quiero con todo mi corazón. And how do women not go, ay, amor? How do they not do that, huh?
You're getting smarter.
Yeah.
I know, like 5 years ago, it was really bad in San Marcos, chlamydia was.
Look at Eric, now he's really confused. Like,
No. I'm well aware chlamydia is out there.
Okay.
Well aware.
So mental health, hey, listen, mental health is a big deal. And it has always been in the population, but it's never really been talked about. I appreciate the Gen Zers being able to talk about their mental health issues openly, without fear of anybody and what they care about, what they're talking about, right? And you looked at some of the big sports stars come out first. They're the people who came out first. Naomi Osaka came out and said it, right? Ben Simmons came out and said it,
Kevin
right?
Love.
Huh?
Kevin Love.
Kevin Love, he was probably the first one of them all. But why do you know about him?
He's my second cousin played professional basketball, and they were in the same graduating class. He's from Oregon.
So think about all these individuals who have now come out, and young people come out and talk about it. Because my age group, if we had any kind of problems, we didn't talk about it. We just dealt with it. right? And that has happened for a long, long time. The Latino population is the same way. The Latino population, if they have problems, they don't wanna talk about it. Because they don't want it to be seen as a weakness. But it is a big problem. And the pandemic, the time that where people were isolated, made it worse. And so now, because I think you know this, I deal with all of the problems that biology has, everything. And I see a lot of mental health issues, right? And it's a big deal. And there are parameters to look at that, but we as educators are not really trained to do that. But ACC does have really good counselors that can help people with that. The problem is, as I tell them, I said, if I call you, I expect you to call the student immediately, not in a day. That's too late. Especially if somebody is told another student, I don't really feel like I need to be on this earth anymore. That is a huge red flag. I get a hold of that and I disseminate that information to my counselors. There's 3 regions of ACC, but it's a big deal, a big deal. Yes.
I mean, it's not necessarily, it kind of is mental health, but like, I used to be like a really stressed out teenager, and I would.
You? I can't believe that.
And I would have like very like problems with my guts, like it would hurt, I would be nauseous all
It's
the time.
very common, Jane.
And no, for real, like I went to the
No, I'm
doctor,
saying it's very
and
common.
It's really.
Just think about this for a moment. My generation grew up thinking about the Cold War. Well, it was the Cold War. We didn't really care too much, except, we always worried about some of these other countries. You all, your age group grew up with people being shot at schools and things like that.
Still happening.
I know.
If you're a kid, you get to send your kid to school now, I wonder if they're gonna get shot.
Yeah. So those are real anxieties. You're well, maybe not yours, but other people had to deal with 911, right? And so those are all real things that have happened in the world that lend people, especially when they're growing up very young, to feel like they're not in a safe place anymore. Where if you recall Halloween for us, for my age group, my mom would give us a pillow sack and said, be back at 9:30. And we would just go everywhere. We would go across the highway. Somebody would say, they're giving out candied apples on Tarleton. And everybody, we would all run down there, a candy apple, right? My dad worked for Coca-Cola, and one year, I can remember we had so much Coke in the house, he didn't know what to do with it, with Coca-Cola, not Coke, Coca-Cola. He would give a bottle of Coca-Cola to all the trick-or-treaters. We had people for miles come visit, because we were good. But nowadays, you can't do that, right? And the media makes it worse because there's a good chance that fentanyl is going to be in the candy. Really? People who pay $2,000 for fentanyl are going to put it in the candy?
Well, for a while there was the needles and stuff too.
Yeah,
I'm more worried about people giving out like edibles with their candy. Thinking that
Also
it's,
expensive.
Those are expensive
well,
also.
what if you're high?
Yeah, if I bought
Or get
edibles,
high,
I'm not
you're
giving
like,
it out to no kiddo. They're not going to appreciate what's going on, Tram. Oh my God.
Record it, and then they're
So,
not
but nowadays we're so afraid of everything that, people always say, go to an area where you trust the people. If you need to find a place to go trick or treating and bring your kids, come to my neighborhood. My neighbors are cool. The whole neighborhood is cool. We will not hurt your kids. We will love your kids. We will give your kids candy. But after I'm done with candy, I don't have anything else. I'll close the door and I'll turn off the pumpkin. That's just the way it is. Yeah.
Going kind of off of Jen's thing, I think to your point, it's really interesting, the physical effects of anxiety, our parents didn't teach us that at all. So the whole time we kind of think, what's wrong with that? I have very similar stuff. But it's, not talked about really. It'll be interesting when my sister has 2 kids and she's pregnant with another one and she talks, little big feelings. I don't know if anyone talks of that. And I feel like a lot of it is also understanding your emotions and how you describe those to people, which we at our generation was not taught. So I don't know if that was essentially what you were going to say.
That is elegantly said, what you just said. It's really about experiences, and if you talk about it openly, I'm still very uncomfortable talking about my feelings. I don't,
Well, you're a man.
fine.
I
But-
mean that in
Men don't have an
a
open
man
space.
has to be like, I am man, you
Yeah.
know, and you don't feel, you're very prideful in a sense, like you don't wanna be
For
the
sure.
one, you don't wanna be the one that looks weak. But it's just for, it's the same for mothers.
But not to the machismo level,
No.
right?
No.
I don't go home and say, "Yaha, bring me a cup of coffee."
It's the same for people like with PTSD who come out of the armies. People, mothers, I had really bad postpartum depression with my daughter, and you don't want to tell somebody because you're embarrassed about it. You know what I mean? And that's the whole thing is embarrassment.
Yeah. So things, I mean, because of that, you know, we are products of our upbringing, and that doesn't mean our parents didn't do a good job. They just did what they knew, right? And so you can't really blame them because that's what they knew. But that's the way we are products of that upbringing, right? And so that's why I really feel great about the younger generation because they're so open about everything. So open that I have to be careful when I walk into my 1308 class and say, well, how are y'all doing today? And I'll get, well, you know, this weekend I had my car get broken into and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, and then, you know, sometimes it's just such a sad story. You can't really talk to class because you want to cry, but you can't cry because if you cry, you're just a wasted case all day long. But this is why I teach at ACC, because I was once you all when I was growing up. And I know what y'all are. The reason that I like chaos so much is because it was noisy at my house all the time. The windows were always up. We lived right by the highway. You know, at 3 o'clock in the morning, you'd be here. You're like, it's just like, I can sleep through anything. My wife says, you know, it's like if she hears like the cat meow outside, she wakes up. On me, if a dog's like, right here, I'm like, okay. And I just, you know, it doesn't bother me at all because I'm so used to a noisy environment. I can sleep anywhere. I have no problem with that at all. Right? You guys, go ahead. Feel free. Okay. Good. Spiritual is a little different. Some people always put spirituality with religion, and that's okay. But to me, spirituality is about purpose of life, right? And I reflect every day. What did I do? What did I do well? What worked? What didn't work? How can I make my life better? How can I make the people's lives better that I'm dealing with? Because that's my goal, right? And so to me, if you have a purpose in life, you're gonna always want to be alive. And it falls into this realm of what makes you healthy, right? Because if you work out all the time and you look great, but you don't have any friends or you don't have any purpose in life, you're not going to be happy. And if you're not happy, you're not going to be healthy. So I know people are different. They're introverted, like my wife. My wife is very introverted. She's happy at home, gardening, reading a book. I am just the opposite. I'm an extrovert. I see people walking down the street. I run outside to say, hello, how y'all doing? My wife says, oh my God. HEB, you gotta watch it because you'll get a discussion with me at HEB and you might not leave. Can I go buy coffee for us? Let's go, you know, whatever. And that's just the way people are. People are different. But I have a purpose in life. My purpose in life is to make sure that I'm financially stable. And purposes in life change, right? I'm about to retire. So as I look at retirement, I'm like, do we have enough money to be comfortable? I'm not rich, and I don't need to be rich. I just need to be comfortable. I do have enough money to do that. And so my wife is just the opposite. She goes, because I learned through the lessons of my parents. My parents struggled every single day of their life. They were always behind on bills. They had trouble. If we had a major catastrophe in the house, we didn't have the money to fix that. If the water pipe broke, we didn't have water. We didn't have any money to fix that, right? So we had to rely on friends. And that's what the Latino population does. The community comes together to help. I am not like that. I pay bills 1 month before they're due. Everything. It drives my wife crazy. She goes, well, when are you gonna pay the bills? I said, for when? She goes, well, this month. I was paying last month. I'm done. I'm working on November already. I'm done, right? So if we think about that for a moment, those are the lessons that I have learned. I never wanna have bad credit. I never wanna have problems with bills. However, because of that, my identity has been stolen twice, right? And I had to deal with that. So there are things going on that put stresses on us, right? And so those stresses are real, right? And the stresses could be everything from about to deliver a baby to, oh my God, Provi's giving me too many tests. Oh my God, I gotta work in a group. Oh, you know, there's all these stressors, right? But that's what makes us stronger, is these stresses. Okay? Good? So there are all these different things that kind of define who we are, right? And so all of these things are making us healthy or not healthy, right? And so if you look at this, how it all fills into what determines good health. Now, we can go on to talk about all facets of health, but I'm only really interested in infectious disease. So what I'm doing is I'm positioning what I am telling you right now to talk about infectious disease and how the microorganisms can affect us, right? If you are stressed out, you're more likely to come down with a respiratory or a gastrointestinal infection just because you're stressed out. And that's not even talking about what they can do later to you in life. That's just now. And so it's important to think about how all these things happen. One of the biggest predictors of being unhealthy is living in poverty. And so you can see down here the social economic factor, right? It is really about poverty. The great equalizer in the world is education. Because if you get an education, whether it be a 2-year education in nursing and become an RN, or a 4-year or a PhD or whatever, it opens doors for you. And if doors are open, then you have opportunity to advance your life. And so what I always want to tell people is the cycle of poverty can be broken, but you have to do something that's different. Right? I have some friends who, as I was part of the J&J family for a long time, I have a lot of friends in Philly that I just met because of the different people that I knew there and how I'd go out to pubs and things like that and meet people. A lot of those individuals have lost their jobs because there are no more coal mining jobs. And those individuals are still pining for the days that the coal mining, they had coal mining jobs and they were making a really beautiful living, right? $100,000 a year. They're waiting for those jobs to come back. Those jobs are never gonna come back. And when I talked to them the last time, I said, why are you waiting for those? They're not gonna happen. Why don't you go get trained? There are programs that you can become a part of at a community college where you get trained in coding. And if you get trained, thank you. If you get trained in coding computers, then what can happen is you can do a different job that won't be as dangerous as coal mining, and you'll still be able to make a great living. They won't listen to me because they want their coal mining jobs back.
I feel like there's a fear, not necessarily a fear, but
Yeah, you
something
can
of
call it a fear.
education.
Why?
My husband's the same way.
But have I ever been mean to you one day of
Not
that you've
me.
known me? Well,
No, so say my husband works for his father and he's a mechanic for him. He works on big equipment.
but
Dozers.
there's nothing wrong with
No,
that.
but listen, so the company isn't doing great right now. And his dad told him that he would send him to school so that he would have a job, like a diesel mechanic school, so that he could get a really well-paying job if the business goes under. He won't do it.
But we have such a great program here at ACC for those kinds of things.
But it's
You're
just like,
failing.
yeah,
You're
it's,
failing.
I don't know what it is.
See, and I'm
It's
just
bad.
the opposite.
Back to the males.
Oh,
mostly.
but see, I'm just the opposite. I fail on a daily basis and I learn from that.
But it took
My
some
husband is
sort
not
of
that way.
part of your upbringing or something that you taught yourself
That's true.
along the way.
That is true.
And it's like you're conditioned to it now. But if you I grew up in a house where failing was not allowed. And so,
Sure.
Are you okay? Yeah.
if you
Yeah, I
got in
don't
a
know
house where
why.
perfectionism is like the only thing that's acceptable and somebody's there to smack your hand every time you write those cursive letter wrong, and it perpetuates, you know, you're just.
That's my husband. He has a fear of not being perfect. like, and it's really, there's a lot of people like that these days, like, and I don't,
Those are the people that make the first D in their class and they try to go back to school and they drop the whole class and feel like the whole class. And I did that for a while. It freaked me out. If I got a bad grade on the first exam, I was done with the class. I didn't want to even try anymore because of the program. So you have to reprogram yourself, which takes you being active in your own, healing. And some people just are not there. It's a different level of consciousness.
I get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
What I can highly encourage people to do is actually do therapy. I did it, I stopped this year, so I did it all 2021. And it was like one of the best things. Sorry, I just choked, so.
she's not crying.
But it was really seriously one of the best things I could have done for myself, for many. Sorry. For many, many reasons. And I did it with BetterHelp.com. So it was made very possible for, during COVID times to do it. And it helps with that type of stuff. It helps with other things. It just helps to have someone to talk to. And I just wanted to put that out
I
there.
appreciate you being open and saying that.
I love it. I think it's very important and people don't do it. People don't talk about it.
I
either.
totally
The
agree
school
with
has
that.
free counseling too, like,
Here.
in person.
Here at ACC.
They're awesome.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
one
Andrew's
thing
really
too,
good. You guys can
BetterHelp
do
is
that.
relatively affordable.
Yeah,
And they give you even 40% off if you fall into the category of like, where you might not make that much money. So of these $75 a week or something, or whatever, they take 40% off, so it's even cheaper. I don't know how it is now, things must have gotten a little bit more expensive, but I just wanna throw it out there, and like, I would really like for people to do it. Have a session, see how it goes, you can always change the person that you can talk to.
What's your referral code?
It took me a while, and I don't wanna go very far with this, it took me a while to get to the point where I was like, you know what, I think I'm ready to stop, so I stopped a few months ago.
I've always
But
felt
I
like therapy.
might start again, because, life's.
Pro V.
College.
Pro V, yeah.
I feel like therapy should be like a requirement.
For parenting, for sure.
So I don't know if you guys know this, but we offer a course that's required for all new students. It's called Learning Framework. And I think it's such an important course, especially if you get a really good instructor. I know a guy who teaches it. But,
I don't think I took that.
You do? Cause I'm supposed
I
to
do
take it
teach,
next semester.
I haven't taught in a while, but I do teach it. But, to me, when I was in college, I worked 3 jobs to go through college. That's just undergrad. The reason I worked 3 jobs is because I didn't know that there was money available. My parents had never gone to school, I had no idea. I saved $5,000 working at a hospital before I went to college, thinking that $5,000 would get me through 4 years of college. It didn't. It was gone in the first semester. So I worked 3 jobs. I was overnight stocker at a grocery store. I worked and washed dishes, and then eventually taught laboratories for my major professor, and that's how I got to know him. And then I also worked at a bookstore during the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right when it was open.
How much did you get sick? You got sick a lot, huh?
Did not get sick a lot.
That's
I only slept about 4 hours a night for about 10 years when I was in undergrad and grad school, because I would get out of class. I would get out of my job at about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I had a class at 8 o'clock. So I would drive to a place, and I would take a nap, and then I would get out and go to class.
Which made nice.
So that's the only way I could survive. But I did it. But in my junior year of college, one of my friends said, you probably can apply for grants and for loans. And I'm like, what? So I went over, and sure enough, I qualified for everything. So it made my life a little easier, but I didn't know that for the first 2.5 years. So I was working my tail off thinking that's what's required. Right? But it made, and so I got 2 degrees for about $10,000. Right? and I paid that off, because, you know, I'm real stickler about finances. But that took so much of a load off of me. After that, part of my junior and senior year as an undergrad, I had time to go do the things I really liked, right, which was play tennis and volleyball and racquetball. And that's how I met my wife, in grad school, playing racquetball. Oh, by the way, if you've ever had Dr. Flo, Dr. Flo is an instructor here. She and I have been friends since grad school, and she kicked my butt on the racquetball court. So, and she was aggressive too, Tram. I'd be in the way, and she would like, fall.
Do you play pickleball?
I do play pickleball.
Pickleball's fun.
It's becoming a really big thing. Probably my next sport when I can't move from playing tennis.
Yeah.
Is there a pro league in pickleball?
Oh, there've been pro leagues for a while now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you can watch them on ESPN.
Oh,
It was fun.
It might come.
So think about this for a minute, folks. If this is a Thursday and you get paid on, I don't know, Friday, but you only have $30 today, and you have 4 people to feed tonight, what are you gonna do?
The drive-through.
What's that?
You're gonna go to fast food
You're
probably.
gonna go fast food.
Brown
You're gonna
bag
go.
special or
You're gonna
something.
go buy really cheap food, which is not good for you. And so, therefore, the habits of the younger family members start to be built fairly early on. I was completely shocked when I started to date my wife, because they all sat down for dinner at one time, and the meals were nicely proportioned out. There was a small piece of protein, there was a starch, and there was some green vegetables, and there was always salad. When we ate at my house, it was like, todo está listo, and we'd all come in and we would just grab a plate and stick things. It was beans and rice and something else, all the time. Sometimes if we didn't have enough to do anything, it was eggs and weenies, and that was dinner. And so I was taking a, now don't get me wrong, I lived a really great childhood, but I understand what my family went through to do that. One of the most selfish things I ever did was I asked my father to buy me a class ring when I was a senior, mostly because everybody else was getting a class ring. And my dad could not afford it, and I knew he couldn't afford it. I still asked him, and he did it. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And you know that class ring, I still have it, but I only wore it like 3 times. And so that's one of the most selfish things I ever did. And I will never be put into that place again, where I do something just because I want to.
I feel like when you grow up like that, you live it or you learn it when as you get older. Like that's how we were growing up, like McDonald's,
So-
$1 burger, but now I absolutely hate fast food. If I can't cook it, then we're gonna go to like a nice restaurant. I hate fast food. It makes me sick to eat it.
So my wife, when we were younger, we would always tell, well, what is the one thing you would love to have, right? And I said, a Mustang, because that has been my dream since I was a little kid. I wanted a Mustang. And so now that we're older, she said, if you want to buy a Mustang, you can. I'm like, why would I buy a Mustang? It is not functional for us. And I said, and I'm old and I won't even look good in it anymore. So why would I buy a Mustang, right? So, you know, the last vehicle that we purchased was my little Mazda 3. And I can zip around town. Yeah. But,
Mazdas are great.
but she said, you can buy a Mustang if you want. It's a dream, and let's leave it there because it's fun to think about, but that's it. So if you don't get the proper nutrition, you're going to get sick. And if you get sick, you're not going to be able to get the care that you need, right? And it's just this loop that you go through over and over again. And then you go to the physician, and now you're in debt because of everything you had to purchase, and now your credit card bill is really high. And in order to continue to live, you have to use a credit card, and over again, you just do what the credit card companies absolutely want you to do. Spend a lot, but pay minimum, and then they get a lot of interest off of it. Right? And so that's the problem. So when I talk about the fact that education is the great equalizer, it will allow you to do whatever you want. And Isabella and I really like the fact that she's very open about, and I hope you don't mind, I'm gonna talk about you a little bit. I really am happy that she's quite open about talking about what she wants to do. And just this semester, her thing has changed 3 times, right? So she said, I want to be a nurse, and she said, no, I'm going to go into farm sales, and now she's back to being a nurse, maybe, we don't know. But to me, this is the right time to be thinking about those things, because the future is bright for you all. There are many jobs open. You just have to decide what you want to do. And your life will change. When you become a healthcare professional, you're going to be making bank. And your life will change completely.
The way prices are going, none of us are.
Well, and hopefully, hopefully it'll change for the better. Okay? So if we think about this for a minute, this feeds into what I really want to talk about is how these organisms interact with us and make us sick. Because this microbiology course is really only interested in that much of a science, right? Microbiology is a discipline science, it's an umbrella science, it's huge, but we're only looking at that much of the entire science. Because that's what this course is designed to do, to open your eyes to what is out there that can affect us negatively from a disease, an infectious disease perspective. So then we bring these terms up that I might have used in the past, but maybe in passing them, I didn't really explain them. Now I'm going to explain them. Pathogen. A pathogen is an organism that can cause disease. There's many different types of pathogens. An opportunistic pathogen is an organism that is on your body or in your body all the time, and usually is part of the innate mechanisms that make you healthy. But given the right opportunity, Tram, it can get into your body and make you sick. It can get into your bloodstream, it can get into your urinary tract, and it can make you sick. Okay? A virulent organism is a whole different ballgame. So a virulent organism is that we know causes infection, and not only that, but it makes you really, really sick and can take your life. Right? So Ebola is my example up there of a virulent organism, but it's hard to acquire, which is a good thing. But now if we just think about some of the other organisms we talked about for just a little bit, right? We've talked about influenza, virulent. We talked about COVID. And if we think about COVID and influenza, which one is more virulent? Influenza. Especially now, because I've gone on the record the last time saying I think we've reached herd immunity. But then I got scared the other day when they said the subvariant is causing so many cases in other countries that I'm like, it's just a matter of time before it comes here. Everybody has all kinds of problems here, right? So now we're gonna have to go back and fight that. We might be fighting this COVID thing for a long time.
So a way to say that is flu is more virulent than COVID?
That's correct. Okay, good, especially, now let's do this, Samantha, so we get a better understanding. H1N1, swine flu, and H5N1, avian flu, which one is more virulent?
H5N1.
60% mortality rate, dangerous.
So it's whichever one is more dangerous, is the more virulent?
Virulent, yes.
Virulent.
Is in mortality, or is in just in?
However you want to set the parameter.
Okay.
You can say it by how many cases are actually being caused by the organism, how many deaths, how many negative outcomes. It depends on what the parameter you want to look at. Okay?
So it depends on the context that you're using.
Always, always. So let me give you an example of that. And I didn't pay her any extra money to start this line of thread questioning. But E. coli 015787 and the E. coli that's in my gut, which one's more virulent? Which causes hemolytic uremic syndrome. That's a bad boy.
What was the answer?
E. coli 015787. Because that's the bad boy, Samantha. It causes hemolytic uremic syndrome. The E. coli that's in my gut doesn't really cause anything.
Because it's yours.
It's mine. I'll give it to you if you want it. I'll give you shake your hand. But if that E. coli that's in my gut gets into my bloodstream because I have an accident and I perforated my intestinal tract, now I'm in deep doo-doo, really. Are you with me? Why do you have a little,
Jack in the Box.
oh,
I came earlier in the semester. I told you I worked in a manufacturing plant after college making growth thermometers after the Jack
tell
in the
us the
Box.
story.
Well, they had I don't remember which states it was in, but a few people got really sick. I don't know if they died or not from eating very
20 people died.
E. coli burgers from Jack in the Box. So the small manufacturing outfit in Gainesville, Florida, all of a sudden got overwhelmed with contracts to produce growth thermometers, because I guess a lot of the fast food chains didn't have a standardized process for maintaining the temperature of the grill.
That's exactly correct.
So they started, I worked for a temp service, and they hired all these temps to come in. We didn't know anything about manufacturing.
Well, what, that's always a, oh my God, they don't know. So, here's the story, right? Jack in the Box standard operating procedure said, get the grill at 180. But the problem is they used the little thing on the grill to set it to 180, but that wasn't calibrated. And so they were cooking the hamburgers not all the way through, and people got sick. Because if you think about hamburger meat, what goes into making hamburgers is everything that's left over from whatever, and they grind it all up and they make hamburger meat, right? And so the surface area on hamburger meat is so much greater than the surface area of steak. If you have E. coli 0157H7 on a steak and you cook both sides of the steak, E. coli is going to be dead. But if you don't cook the hamburger meat, which has got it all throughout, if you don't cook it all the way through, then E. coli will survive and you'll get sick from it. So yeah. And so now, even today, because we remember those experiences, my wife uses a thermocouple every time she makes a big steak or a roast or
A
turkey.
what?
Turkey.
Oh,
A
we use
roast,
the
a
what?
roast, a roast, a thermocouple.
What's that?
It's a real fancy thermometer that it has a metal needle and you stick it in the actual meat, and then it has this little thing that comes out and it can attach to a reader and it'll
Yeah,
tell you
yeah.
how hot it
I know
gets.
what you're talking about now.
Just in time for Christmas.
You can just get a $6 one on Amazon too. I just
Yeah.
had that one.
Not my
She's a
wife.
meat
My wife
eater.
wants to find the ones that are like, it'll like sing a song for you if it gets to
No.
temperature.
See, I
So
don't, I guess I'm weird, I don't use anything unless I'm making chicken or fish. But like hamburger meat, I don't buy anything unless it's like ground sirloin.
So why not shrimp?
I don't cook shrimp.
Oh, you don't cook shrimp. You eat shrimp raw.
No, I don't like shrimp.
Oh, you don't eat shrimp, okay.
I'll eat it at like a restaurant, but I don't, it's a pain in the ass to prepare it, I don't do it.
I was telling, my favorite joke to say at restaurants is, like, when I order chicken is I'll be like, I'll get that medium rare, and like the look that people give you, or just they're just like, no. Like,
Chicken should be cooked all the
Yeah,
way through.
that's right.
20% of all chicken has salmonella on it.
Mhm.
And I don't care what you've done to it. What do you, ooh,
I'm like so grossed out by chicken right now.
just cook it. It'll be
No,
all
I
right.
just like with the pregnancy, it's
Yeah,
been
yeah.
very, very weird. I don't want a lot of meat, and I hate chicken right now. Like I just want chicken to die.
So the one organism you should be worried about is Listeria. That's the big one for you. So just don't eat leftovers and you won't have a problem.
Oh, we don't eat leftovers. Snooty little people in my house. Just
What's that?
put it in
Wasn't
a
there an
container
outbreak
and throw
of
it out.
listeria in something?
Guess what?
What was it?
My favorite ice cream.
Oh, that's why I remember it.
Luba.
I remember the day it came back
Listeria
on
can
the
grow
shelf,
in
I
colder
went to school
temperatures.
to go eat blue pill.
I went to the grocery store, picked it up so I could go eat it at home.
Me and my husband both skipped school that day.
Portals of entry. We are interested how these organisms can get into the body. So you can see here's some pathways, right? The skin, the mucous membranes, through the placenta, or through the parenteral route. Now, if you talk about parenteral drugs enter the body any way but through the mouth. So when we talk about how organisms get into the body, we have a different way of talking about parenteral, because some of these ways, the mucous membranes and skin, is really already talked about, right? But really, when we talk about parenteral routes, it's really any way but the mouth, right? And so through the skin, intraoptically, intranasally, intra-aurically, intrathecally, intravenously, there's all kinds of different ones, right? Yes.
When it says placenta, what does it mean?
So there's certain organisms that can cross the placenta, and they can make a negative outcome for the developing fetus.
That would be Listeria.
Listeria is one of them. There's others, right? But we're gonna talk about some of those in a minute. So there's a difference between contamination and infection. And I want you all to be using these terms correctly, because some of you are gonna be superstars in your careers, and you might be on Good Morning America, and if I see you, oh, look, there's Eric on Good Morning America. Eric, you better use these terms correctly. You better not say, we're having a major contamination with influenza. You better say there's an infection of influenza going on, right?
Or I messed it up.
Contamination simply means that a surface is contaminated, whatever surface that is. But an infection is when it gets into the body. Okay? Good? So, if we think about this, here's the skin. To me, the skin is a beautiful anatomical and physiological mechanism to protect us. This thing here, as long as it's intact, almost nothing can get in it, right? Unless something breaks or breaches the skin. Now, there's lots of ways that can happen. You can get a cut, you can get a laceration, you can get a mosquito bite, you can, all different ways to get it. But if this thing is intact, it protects you, and it's very hard for things to get in. Okay? I love the skin, and I love the way it functions for us. It is the largest organ of the body. Okay? Questions? I love mouths. One of the things I notice about very much, except for Tram, because or Amy, I never see their mouths. But one of the things I notice about people real quickly is their mouth. I can tell how they take care of themselves because of how their gums look, right? If you look at this particular mouth, it is a beautiful mouth. It is gorgeous. Look how tight and pink the gums are when they're against those teeth, right? You want them that pink and you want them that tight. If they are really red and bulging, we all have those friends who, when they smile, their teeth are like pulsating, their gums are pulsating. I'm like, oh my God. I have a friend, she's maybe not my friend anymore because she's mad at me, but we went out to eat a hamburger and she took a bite of her hamburger and there was blood on her hamburger. I'm like, dude, you really need to go get your teeth checked. And then she got mad at me, oh, I just hurt myself. No, I said, you have periodontal disease. You need to get it checked. Right? And how do I know that? Because I had it. And I had it so bad that I think I told you they cut my gums, they descaled, and then they sutured them back together. My teeth are all there, my gums are pretty, right? And so this is a beautiful mouth, right? Even the moisture is the right opacity, right? It's beautiful. So you can tell a lot about people by their mouths, right? How they take care of themselves. You can tell whether they're a smoker or not. There's all kinds of things you can tell. You can tell whether or not they've had breakfast because of their mouth. Their breath smells terrible.
What about like purple? I've seen like people that have like purple.
So sometimes that's just genetic and you can't really do anything about that. That's just the coloration of your gums. But it's mostly about how close they fit and how tight they fit to your teeth.
Also indicates to everything.
Could be awesome. So here's some of the organisms that can cross the placenta. We've talked about some of these already. Toxoplasma gondii, right, can cause abortion and a bunch of things. Treponema pallidum is syphilis. Listeria monocytogenes, we talked about that, right? There have been major outbreaks of listeria, and although it can be foodborne, it really manifests itself as a organism that infects the entire body. So we have to be really, really careful with this one. Right? And it likes colder temperatures. It will not be inhibited by refrigeration. It will continue to grow. Right? So we have to be sure we understand that, right?
I'm sorry, which one were you talking about?
Listeria monocytogenes. Okay? Cytomegalovirus, right? It can cause, it's usually an infectious agent of the really young, although we are now having troubles with it with the immunocompromised. But I think I told you that if you're a CMV negative, if your blood is CMV negative, your blood can be transfused to babies, and a lot of times they'll say you have baby's blood, and the blood bank will call you about every 6 months or 6 weeks to come give blood, because they can use that CMV negative blood to babies. That's the only one they'll give to babies, right? It can cause deafness, microencephaly, mental retardation, right, of a developing fetus or a very young child, right? So therefore, we don't want to get into this. So we look at the lentivirus, this is AIDS, and the rubyvirus is German measles. And so I'm a collector of documents that talk about infectious diseases, especially very old documents. And so at an auction a while back, I purchased a box lot that had a whole bunch of medical documents. And so I've been reading some of this. It's fascinating to see how they thought about things back then, which is not anywhere close to the way we think about it now. Right? Back then, they were talking about diphtheria and things like that, and how it was affecting the population. We have no diphtheria in the United States right now. So I might bring those in one day and let you look at them, just so that you can appreciate how far we've come from a scientific perspective. So what's the difference between a disease and an infection? Before you answer that, let's just look at these real quick, right? Diseases: cystic fibrosis, cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular heart disease, mental diseases such as depression, but can be all kinds of things, right? Alcoholism is considered a disease, and then you have autoimmune like lupus, but there can be a lot of others. Graves, Ray's, myasthenia gravis, you can go on and on. Yep.
How does something like alcoholism become defined as a disease?
So it's an addiction, mostly. And so addictions to things like anything that is related to alcohol is considered a disease. But the interesting thing is addiction to cocaine is not. Does it make any sense?
I mean, in a medical standpoint, yes, in a personal standpoint, no. I don't believe that it's a disease because it's all self-inflicted.
Well, it's a disease because your cell signals go on and basically say you want alcohol, and you crave alcohol.
But you made your body.
That is true, but you can also make yourself diabetic by just getting really chunky. Right?
This is a fetal alcohol syndrome, or kids that are like crack babies and stuff that had no choice in the matter, or whatever. Something like a physical addiction, holy crap, I'm sure you've seen it. Like,
Yeah.
to alcohol.
But mostly, I'll tell you the truth, mostly alcoholism is a disease because there was enough political pressure to make it a disease. There's very little political pressure to make fentanyl or cocaine or any of those other drugs.
I know all that stuff.
Because
is
a lot
really
of
big
people
debate.
will just think like, will have that thought, but, well, they did that. They did that to themselves, right? And so therefore, it's their problem.
I don't believe necessarily that. I guess when you grow up in situations, it makes you have a harsher view on things. So like if I have a patient, like I'm not going to be a nurse obviously, but if I had a patient that was suffering from liver failure or something like that, because of alcoholism, I would still treat the patient and give them my care, but it just makes you wonder, like, why would you kill your body just for alcohol? Tastes like shit. Like
Feels
it
like
does.
a secondary
Some
disease, if you
people-
ask me, because it's usually because you have a mental health
That's
issue.
what I'm
And
That,
why you're
that's
self-soothing.
very true also.
Self-medicating.
Yeah.
You know, if people always say, well, you know, alcoholism is really found in the lower social economic classes. That's not true. It's found everywhere.
I think it's actually more prevalent in like richer places because they can get better tasting alcohol.
And it's like, there are hardly any adult activities that you can do that alcohol is not the centerpiece for. The older that I get, the more I wanna hang out with people, there's always a drink in someone's hand, and if somebody
That
struggled
will,
with
that will change, because now my family doesn't really, I mean, I can remember going to family functions and there'd be cases and
Beer.
cases of beer. And I'm like, God damn it, guys, let's drink tea. But they wouldn't do that.
I think it's
And soda was the other thing that is the big thing, right? There was cases and cases of soda. Now, they've started thinking more healthy, and like for Christmas when I'm going down, my sister's already making the menu, and she's just gonna have water and tea. But we're still gonna have eggnog with bourbon in it, because, you know, that's just the way it is.
It's a wine.
Yeah, so I like
When
it.
did it become a disease?
A long time ago. I mean, I don't know when, but it's the coding, what is it, IDC, it's a coding for,
It's
what's the
not just
code?
It's not just the United States.
No, you're right, but here, I mean, I'm only really talking about the United States right now, but, well, it's really that coding that they use for insurance purposes. Once it has its own code, it becomes a notable disease.
They'll keep drinking. We run them. They'll keep drinking even when they know it's killing them and they're yellow and
Oh, my
they're
husband's
puking their
grandpa.
guts out.
My
They'll keep
husband's
drinking.
grandpa is a severe alcoholic, and they told him he was gonna die in the next 5 years if he kept drinking. Still drinks every day.
Where infections, if you look at them and listen to the ending, right? Cellulitis, pharyngitis, conjunctivitis, pneumonia, which is also known as pleuritis, right? Cystitis, otitis media, vaginitis, colitis, gastritis, encephalitis. The main thing we have there is itis at the end, which means inflammation. And a lot of times when you have infections, you have inflammation associated with the infection. That doesn't mean that if you have some of these other things, you're not gonna have inflammation. But at least with this, with bacterial infections, two things always, inflammation and fever. Those are the two biggest giveaways for a bacterial infection. Right? And so when people look at the back of your throat and don't see any inflammation and you're not running a fever, they should rule out bacterial. They can still test for it if they want, because there might be some low-level underlying bacteria that are causing a problem. But to me, they shouldn't be prescribing antibiotics at that point. Right? You should basically say, it doesn't look like you have a bacterial infection. You might have a viral infection or postnasal drip due to allergies. Let's take a little bit and look at it and call me if you don't feel better in 2 days. Or call me if you start to have a fever, then that's a different thing. Right? And so I hope people think like that. So disease is defined as a harmful alteration of host tissues or some type of metabolic process. Right? It can be genetic, but it can also be epigenetic, where the influences of the world are having an effect on our body. Right? You come in contact with too much benzene, and then you develop liver cancer. There's all kinds of things that can happen like this. Where if we think about, again, when we think about infection, it's about an organism getting into the body. And so may I introduce to you the science of etiology. The science of etiology is really the science of causation. It's really what is the underlying reason why you're having this problem. Right? And it's one of my favorite things. And as we get into the end of the semester, I'm going to be talking about the etiological agents all the time. I'm never going to say the cause of it. I'm going to say the etiology of it. Because it's about time we all start talking science. It's about time we all start talking the vernacular. And so etiology is the study of causation. And we just simply say the etiological agent is Staph aureus. Okay? So I want you to know some terms, right? I don't really care about the terms above immunology. Those are the diseases that we're not going to really talk about here, right? But if we look at immunological, right, that's important for us, right? Because you can have hypo or hyperactivity with the immune system, and both of those can be detrimental to us, right? And it can affect the microbial load that's in it. You can have neoplastic, which you will hear neoplastic a lot when you get into your discipline, right? Neoplastic means tumor, right? If you have a neoplasm, it's tumor. So I want you to know the term neoplastic. I want you to know infectious, caused by an infectious disease. I want you to know the term teratogenic, which simply means that some type of medical procedure led you to have the infection, right? That's different than nosocomial. Nosocomial simply means that you acquired it in a healthcare facility, but it may not be procedure related. It might just be that your nurse wasn't a very good nurse, right? If people develop bed sores and infections associated with bed sores, that is bad nursing. The nurse should be fired because they weren't doing their job. Okay? And then one of my favorite terms is idiopathic, right? And idiopathic simply means we don't know why this is happening. And so if Amy comes to the doctor and the doctor says, you've got an infection of salmonella, but we don't know how you got it, can you give us a little bit of history? And Amy says, well, I don't really know how I got it. We'll basically say that, well, on the actual write-up, we'll basically say enteritis caused by salmonella idiopathic. She's got inflammation of small intestines, enteritis. It's caused by salmonella etiology, but we don't know how she got it. Right. We don't know how. Good? Questions? So, several people have asked, I'd like to take a medical terminology class. And I would recommend that you all do if you have the opportunity to do so. You can take the 1 hour course, that's really all you need, but you'll become aligned and you'll become very knowledgeable about what these medical terms mean. Because if you do that, then when you go to your program, you're gonna have an easier time. I took medical terminology with my students who were saying, oh, it's really hard. I'm like, it is. I took it with them. And I thought I knew just about every single thing. I learned so much in that medical term class.
They such learning language.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's beautiful. So to talk,
Right?
Mm-hmm.
to talk medicine is like talking a whole different language, right? And it's a beautiful thing. I don't get any kickback from anybody taking a medical term class. I'm just saying that if you want to be a lot more knowledgeable before you go into your program, a medical terminology class will happen.
Surprised that's not required.
We wanted it to be, but the legislature said you can only require certain amount of classes as prereqs before you get into a program, because students should be able to get a degree within 60 to 65 hours. And if we added a medical term class, it would go over that. Because I think that all nursing students should also take cellular molecular biology.
Well, I'm glad you're not in charge.
But we require US history, US government, and Texas history.
Things that when I was, I'm gonna tell you a little story, don't repeat it. Things when I was in college and I was taking 4 science courses and a history course, guess what I said? All I have to do is pass history. I'll make a C in history to make sure I do really well in the science courses, because all I gotta do is meet the requirement. And I didn't care about my GPA as long as my GPA was saying I was really good in science. Because all these other things that I had to take, I really wasn't interested in. I made a C in history, and C for me in history meant continue.
The problem is the history teachers are just as passionate about history
Oh, I
as you are
know.
about microbiology.
I know my
They're
history
like, I'm gonna
te-
teach this like you're gonna become a historian, and I'm like, oh God, I didn't transfer.
My history teacher in college did a whole section on the stock market. And he was relating it to the times when the stock market crashed in, I don't know, back then, I don't remember. But we got to play the stock market for a day. That was so much fun, and I learned a lot then. But, you know, when it came time to the test, I'm like, I have 3 tests this week. I have 1 in immunology, I have 1 in mycology, and I have 1 in history. What do you think I didn't study for?
I was about to say, it depends on where your brain's at, where you are more.
I knew I could at least make a C,
Exactly.
so I didn't put any
That
effort.
was me in ethics. I hated ethics. I hated it, it's just on my brain.
So, I think what we're gonna do is we're just gonna stop right here today. Not because I don't wanna continue to talk, you know how I like to talk. But we're starting unknowns today, so I wanna give us plenty of time to get situated and get ready to go. So if you all will take 10 minutes and meet me in lab.